Hey, my name's Xenu, and you're listening to Anti Moonboy News. We got a good one for you today. We will be taking a look at a positive update for full chain membership proofs. We're also going to be talking about Qubic and the mining situation, which is a big old nothing burger from my perspective, but still something that we can take a look at and kind of expand on mining decentralization. Because actually the bigger problem right now is support XMR and their large portion of the mining hash rate. We will also be talking about Archetyp Market, who is possibly exit scamming or under law enforcement control. But first things first, we have Superchats to get to. First one here is from Jason Henson. He donates 0.01 XMR. And he says, just listen to your cast talking about Ross. I went back and listened to that 21 interview again. A good reminder why we live and breathe XMR. Keep moving forward, XMR and other privacy chains. The world needs you. Thanks, Xenu. I'll buy you a coffee. Well, thank you very much, Jason. Now, when Jason mentioned 21 interview, what he meant by that was the 2021 Bitcoin conference interview that Ross gave while he was in prison. Yeah, it's a tremendous interview. I completely agree that it is a good reminder of why we need something like Monero. And if you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend, as, yeah, it's just really emotional. And I think it's a really good companion interview to the one that Ross did like a week or two ago at the Bitcoin conference in Vegas, which was also really good, but in a different way. Whereas the 2021 interview was much more in despair and, being locked up and not having freedom. This one was all about, okay, what can you do when you win back your freedom? And like, how can you help other people? And how can you help everything? Of course, Bitcoin is not what it used to be from an ideological perspective, of course. And so in this, latest talk that Ross did, he's trying to preach unity to the Bitcoin people, which probably fell mostly on deaf ears, to be completely honest. I heard that there were a lot of people who left the conference hall prior to Ross speaking because they were there for, like Michael Saylor or whatever. But the real one stayed. And I'm sure, again, based on everything I heard from people who went to this Bitcoin conference, I guess a lot of the people there were like pretty great and really open to learning about different things. We always have that stigma that the Bitcoin Moonboys are all delusional and, the laser eyes control everything. Not necessarily the case. There's actually a lot of completely rational cypherpunks who still build on Bitcoin and still use it. This is kind of why I am so against Moonboyism in Monero, because, just because Monero is obscure doesn't mean it's not susceptible to Moonboyism overtaking the project and, acting as the majority rule, the rule by a mob, which unfortunately is happening with Bitcoin now, and how they are all, chasing Saylor and whatever scam Ponzi of the week. But anyways, the point I'm trying to make, though, is Ross was in front of everybody talking about, being open to looking at other projects and other blockchains. And I think that's really great. But in comparison to his 2021 presentation, which wasn't really a presentation, it was him literally calling from prison. It's quite the contrast. So anyways, thank you very much, Jason, for that donation. Really appreciate that. Next donation is from Shortwave Surfer 2009. He donates 0.01 XMR, and he says, hey, you may want like a mic pop filter or something because your S's are very sharp. Thought about running Darknet Market Maximalism audio through a processor to attempt to soften those peaks. Yeah, I think my audio definitely needs some improvement. The S sound is just freaking hard. I don't know if you've done audio editing yourself, shortwave, but yeah, it's really tricky. And after I finished recording, I kind of put it side by side with other like audiobook recordings and like kind of compared them, and I think it sounded fine, to be honest. I think one thing that came out really well was the P sound. When I'm saying peer to peer, right? That like popping. I think it's a plosive, I think is the word, something like that. Yeah, that can get really grating. So I actually did some stuff prior to recording to help with that. The S's are a little bit harsh, though. I agree with that. I probably could have run it through like what's it called? A de-esser? I think that's what it's called. I probably could have run it through that. So maybe that's something that could be done. I would have put a lot more effort into the audio portion of it if I was releasing this for money. Really, the recording of it was kind of an afterthought to the actual writing. But yeah, I mean, it definitely could be better. I agree with that. All right, next up, we got a donation from Kanzan. He donates 0.25 XMR. Thank you very much for that massive donation. And he says, Darknet Maximalism forever. Forever. I agree, man. I agree. I am quite thrilled with the manifesto. Quite proud of it. I've received a lot of just very positive feedback. I have a couple podcast interviews coming up with different people, so that's really cool. And yeah, pretty much like every other day I'm receiving like some email from somebody, which is pretty cool. So the other thing I've noticed too is I'm starting to get like subtweets about me, which is like pretty obvious because like I've been really hammering the idea of the cryptocurrency being used on darknet markets. That cryptocurrency is important to study because darknet markets are the markets in which people need cryptocurrency. And I've been repeating that, phrase like repeatedly for quite some time now. So when somebody like criticizes that viewpoint, especially recently, there's a decent chance they're talking about me, right? So recently, the Dash man, Joel, he tweeted out and he wrote this essay in like probably 5 minutes. It was very sloppy. He wrote his essay on why. What was the quote? It was like his quote was why darknet markets are not a good metric for privacy. He actually wrote an article about this. It sucked. Completely missed the point of what I've been talking about. He also didn't mention me at all, which typical. It doesn't want to credit my great work for just because of pride or whatever. But here's what I did though. I responded to him directly, and I just blew him the fuck out. I don't know, because the guy, he's not taking my work seriously, even though it's very clear to me that darknet markets are an incredibly powerful metric for what normal people are doing when it comes to using cryptocurrency as a privacy tool. Like, what else are we going to look at? What other economy can we actually observe and measure? You know what I mean? There are none. It's this is it. I mean, I shouldn't say there are none. I mean, there are other ways we can observe privacy being used, but this is just a fantastic, real world example that we can just look at and monitor. Because what's proposed by the critics of Darknet Market Maximalism is that we should be looking at white papers, or we should be, reading, debates between cryptographers. And it's just like, you're missing the point, man. This isn't, this dick measuring contest of who has the best privacy. It's looking at the project as a whole. And really what's important is looking at the philosophy of the project. Where is that, beating heart of cypherpunk? Where's that, beating from? And, it's clear to me that a project like Zcash, it's mostly just academics and moonboys. It's also very statist, very sympathetic of government, and, compliant and willing to work with government, which is just like, we can see what will happen to Zcash down the line if it were to be adopted. It would be compromised, right? So when you're comparing projects just on how private you can be, it's meaningless. What you really should be comparing, okay, this is what you should be comparing. You should be comparing how the average person uses your cryptocurrency, okay? What you should be doing is you should have 100 people randomly and then say, okay, use this. And if you take just 100 random people, I guarantee you 50 of them would just not know what the fuck to do and wouldn't be able to use cryptocurrency. Another 25 of them, they would struggle, but they would have a basic concept of things, and they'd be able to replicate what you're doing. And then, as you go, further, maybe the next 15, they would understand things and be able to use it. And the last, small sliver of them would really understand things. With Monero, though, you don't really have to really, really understand things. You could just use it and you'll have very good privacy. But of course with Zcash, though, you have to know the specific type of wallet that you have to get. And you have to know that you have to go to shielded. And those concepts are very simple. Very simple. But for somebody who has absolutely no idea how cryptocurrency works, that is really confusing to them. They don't understand the whole switching to shielded concept. And I guarantee you that, again, if you were to just take a sample of 100 people, a lot of those people would just use transparent Zcash and not understand that difference. Again, it's very simple. I'm not saying it's not simple. But that's what I'm saying, though. You have to dumb things down because the average person is just not doing this research. And when you get into these debates with, well, my cryptocurrency is more private than your cryptocurrency. It's okay, my Monero OPSEC and your Zcash OPSEC is the same. Okay, I'm not going to use KYC. I'm in the weeds. You will have no idea of tracing anything I'm doing, just like I can't trace anything you're doing. Okay, this is just pointless to talk about. Let's look at everybody, right? And not only Zcash, Lightning Network too. It's listen, super fatnet. Okay, I get it. I get that you can use Lightning Network privacy. I'm not talking about you. Okay, I'm talking about. Let's look at the 100 people using Lightning Network. How many of them are using Lightning Network like you? Right? None of them. Okay? If you had 100 Lightning Network users, how many of them are using Lightning Network like you? Right? Who? The vast majority are not. And that's really the more important thing to study. So yeah, Monero's privacy, it's not perfect, but it's very strong for what it is. And the default of what it is very strong. And that's why we're seeing that adoption. So really that default privacy, it immediately upgrades a cryptocurrency in terms of adoption because it just dumbs everything down, So default Monero compared to default Lightning Network or default Zcash, Monero easily wins. And therefore that's why it's being adopted in darknet markets, because most of the people on darknet markets, they're just, Joe the plumbers, right? They're just average people. So anyways, it's crazy to see people actually trying to argue against the observation of darknet markets as this, incredible metric. This is it. This is if you are a cryptocurrency, you want to be used on darknet markets. It legitimizes your cryptocurrency. And I mean, it's crazy that people try to fight against that. I do have to mention too, so at some point this week, someone posted my manifesto on Reddit, which was pretty cool, because I didn't know that person. So I was like, oh, based. And apparently someone from Brazil translated the manifesto. They even edited the cover art so the text on the cover was in Portuguese. How cool is that? So I think some other translations may be coming. If you're listening, shoot me an email with those translations. I'm gonna probably have like separate pages for different translations. Yeah, I think I got like a decent amount of like Portuguese listeners and supporters, so I freaking love that, man. Getting support from like all around the world, man, the best. Absolutely the best. So anyways, rambling a little bit here, but it's been a good week for Darknet Market Maximalism, and I do have some interviews coming up within the next couple weeks. Next donation is from Don't Be Gay, and he donates 0.064 XMR, and we'll give that an air horn. And he says, been watching your video series on Odyssey. Great work. I've seen 15 episodes so far. Only suggestion I have is try not to have too much overlap of info from one video to the next. Some of the examples given are too similar. But overall, it is good. Keep going. Yeah, thank you very much. Don't be gay. You know, I do agree. Like, when you're making videos, like especially like educational videos, you have to have a target audience in mind, right? And so I'm assuming you're talking about Attack of the Poison Outputs, by the way, which is the educational series I've made about Monero's privacy. If you haven't listened to it or checked it out, and you want to learn about Monero and you know how Monero can be attacked, check out Attack of the Poison Outputs. It's on all of my video channels. You can find links at antimoonboy.com. But anyways, yeah, when you're making a series, you have to like have an idea of like your audience in mind, right? And so the hardest thing to do is to like cast a wide net, and that's what I'm trying to do with Attack of the Poison Outputs, right? I want beginners, and I want more advanced people, and I guess most importantly, I want like kind of like intermediate people, right? People who like get Monero but like really want to learn more. That's my main target audience. Not necessarily noobs, but like people who are like beginners who are like enthusiastic about learning about Monero. So that's who I'm really targeting. So yeah, I do have to like repeat myself and beat a dead horse on certain things, but I'm doing that kind of intentionally to like really drill into their minds, like, don't use KYC, right? I say that like a million times. Well, that's why. But yeah, it's tough. The other thing too is like I've made this series over the course of like several months. So I'm just going to repeat myself because it's like I don't have like a script I wrote. Like, you know, I have like a topic that I know I have to talk about, and so I'm going to repeat myself. So speaking of Attack of the Poison Outputs, though, that should be coming back in July. I have to finish it. I still have like at least 6 or 7 episodes to do. For example, I do have to make a video on the leaked Chainalysis slides that came out like a year ago. I have to do that. I have to make a video about I2P and nodes. I have to make a video about how you can attack nodes in general and things of that nature. Yeah, there's a decent amount of things to talk about still. And yeah, I want to do that. Probably July, I'm going to tackle that. I'm kind of taking a little break right now. And after that, too, got some other stuff I'm thinking about doing. But I will be. But yeah, so that'll be coming. So keep an eye out for that. But anyways, yeah, thanks for that donation again, man. I appreciate that. Now, next week is Monerokon. It is the yearly conference for Monero. A big deal. The brightest minds in Monero will be gathering to give presentations. And through Anti Moonboy, we are giving out an exclusive coupon to you guys. If you are still buying a ticket or need to buy a ticket, you can use the promo code AntiMoonboy20, which I will put in the description. And with that code, you get 20% off. How cool is that? I did see that there were a couple other promo codes given out. For example, on Reddit, they're only getting 10%, those suckers. But through Anti Moonboy, you're getting 20. So that's pretty awesome. So again, that's Anti Moonboy 20 if you still need to buy a ticket. And I highly recommend it because, the talks here are freaking awesome. I'm taking a look at the schedule here right now. You got, for example, Dr. Sarang, you got Archetyp Mine, Justin Ehrenhofer, etc. And I also will be helping out with this. I'm going to be doing the narration for 2 presentations, both for Rucknium. The first presentation will be on Ospeed, which was the really big news story earlier this year for Monero. It was found that ring signatures aren't as strong as we thought. I mean, we already knew they weren't that strong, but I guess the decoy selection algorithm is lacking, I guess. And so this was research done by Rucknium. Really tremendous stuff. So I'm really excited to be doing that presentation. And the other presentation I'm doing, which I'm really excited as well for, is about defeating spy nodes on the Monero network. This has been kind of going under the radar just because it's been an ongoing kind of investigation. A lot of this has been behind closed doors or through private communications, but basically there is concerns that there are spy nodes on the Monero network right now. And so Rucknium and Boog 900 have some work that they've done on this, and they're going to be presenting it at Monerokon. So I will be doing the narration for that as well. And so I guess they have some pretty cool countermeasures that they are looking at, including a Dandelion++ alternative called Clover. Yeah, I haven't actually recorded those presentations yet, but I will be doing that. So if you are attending Monerokon, the spy node presentation will be on Sunday, and the Ospeed one will be on Friday. It's going to be cool. I'm going to be actually working on Friday during the presentation that I'm recording, so I'm going to listen to it while I'm working. So that should be fun. But yeah, I'll be doing that, and you'll be able to hear me. How cool is that? But anyways, that is Monerokon. Definitely check that out. And also, okay, so I'm going to do some channel updates now. Speaking of Monerokon, I'm probably going to be doing a Monerokon summary on my channel, probably each week on Anti Moonboy News for the next couple weeks. I'm going to do like a summary for each day, basically. So I'll dedicate like 15 minutes to day 1, 15 minutes to day 2, 15 minutes to day 3, or something like that. Maybe it'll be more content. I'm not really sure, but if you weren't aware, the live stream is going to be on YouTube, which I didn't even know about until actually like last week. So how cool is that? So if you are not able to make it to Monerokon, you can just watch it on YouTube. So I will be doing a summary kind of like recap thing, and that's going to be an Anti Moonboy News feature. And that's going to be starting, I guess next week I'll probably do day 1, and the following week I'll do day 2, etc. So yeah, if you're looking for like a summary kind of video, maybe someone to kind of like give you the cliff notes, so then maybe you can later check it out, I will be doing something like that. Maybe not for next week. I might have to absorb the material a little more, but I will be doing some sort of recap kind of thing for you guys. I already did talk also about Attack of the Poison Outputs. That will be returning at some point in July. I got my interviews coming up for Darknet Market Maximalism as well for the channel, and of course Anti Moonboy News every Monday will be released for the latest in peer-to-peer cash. Also, I have the merch store at antimoonboy.com/merch if you'd like to buy a t-shirt. Those are definitely still for sale, so check that out. And one more thing to note too, for Anti Moonboy News, I am probably discontinuing the slideshow kind of thing I've been doing for each episode. Mostly because people just kind of throw my show on and listen to it, from what I understand. I will be trying to link, tweets or whatever in the timestamps. So I will be doing that. But frankly, I'm just too lazy to, do a slideshow if, most people aren't, actually looking at the slideshow anyways. So I'm discontinuing that. But I will be providing links in the description. So hopefully that doesn't piss people off. If it does piss you off, let me know, and then I'll bring back that feature. If I get enough people asking me for it, then fine, I'll bring it back. But that is the idea. At least I've been doing it the past couple weeks, and I'm probably just going to keep doing it that way. I will, of course, though, have screen sharing and stuff for, Attack of the Poison Outputs and other series in the future. Now, I am actually thinking in probably like September, I'm going to launch a new series, or maybe October, kind of that area. I haven't decided yet what I want to do. A part of me wants to do like a total beginner series for Monero, because I think a lot of people, I've like had demand for that in the past. So I might do like a very beginner friendly kind of series. And like that's going to be like totally holding your hand, like taking things one step at a time. Like we're going to download a wallet, like that type of beginner kind of series. But anyways, let's move on to the news. So to start things off, we got to talk about full chain membership proofs, and we have a very positive update. Now, last week and the week before, we were talking about full chain membership proofs and how it did hit a bit of a setback with the math about the divisors, and this math is really important for the scalability of Monero with full chain membership proofs. And so there was some concern as to whether or not the math would check out with CipherStack, and CipherStack is one of the auditors for full chain membership proofs. Well, the good news is they did publish some of their findings this week, and it's very positive. And it seems like things are going to be going according to plan. So this was from the Monero Research Lab. I'm looking through the logs right now. And basically, to quote CipherStack, they said that we think we have things proven to our satisfaction. We just haven't finished fully computing all the probabilities and computational costs, nor have we fully finished providing examples. However, the vast majority of the argumentation is done, and I think good. And they are publishing this under the PDF on GitHub, Silver Bullet, which is spelled SLVER bullet, or straight line verification for bullet proofs. And this is work done by CipherStack. And I'm not going to bother reading the PDF because this is like complicated math stuff, which this show is not for. But if you want to read it, definitely check that out, because it goes through all their math and their proofs for these divisors, as I understand it, and how it works, because apparently it does work. Now, the reason this is very good news is because then we're moving in the right direction. We'll probably have this audited as well, and once this math is with this looked at by a bunch of different eyes, we can go forward with the testnet, and from the testnet we'll get to the mainnet, and everything will be hunky-dory, right? So hopefully a year from now we are using full chain membership proofs, and ring signatures are a thing of the past. Anyways, though, if you were concerned about full chain membership proofs being delayed for a long time, we are right on schedule. So very positive stuff, and I'm excited to read more about this. Now, the next topic at hand is about Qubic. Now, I've talked about this last week, but since then there's been even more posturing going on between the Monero social media guys and this Qubic guy, Come From Beyond, I think his name is. And there's definitely people concerned about this guy because I'll just come out and say it. This guy is a total dick. He's an arrogant dick. I guess he has quite the reputation. I actually didn't even know about this, but he was involved with this Russian kind of like hacker crime group that actually has ties with the founders of Bitcoin, which is what Monero is forked from. So like this guy, he's been around, and like to think about like cryptocurrency and like cypherpunk stuff is like weird shit happens. So like this guy being loosely involved with Monero and him being very arrogant and stuff. This is kind of just something that happens in these circles. And so I guess this guy Come From Beyond. He has these loose ties with people, and then eventually he started IOTA, which was a cryptocurrency project, and then he got kicked out of it or something, and he's been making other projects in the meantime. And Qubic is his latest project, and the problem with this guy is that he is kind of the mad scientist problem, where when we talk about like what if somebody were to discover an inflation bug, generally speaking, that would probably be somebody who is a researcher who would then report it through HackerOne or whatever, and they would the Monero team would implement a patch and things would be fine. Or someone like this guy, he would just exploit it. Like this guy, like everything I've read from him, he doesn't really care about different projects. He just wants to get money and to get rich. And if your project isn't good enough, screw it, kind of thing. So anyways, he has said some aggressive comments about how, they could, or Qubic can, theoretically 51% attack Monero. He put out like a poll, should we do it, guys, kind of thing. Basically trying to get attention, which is working, to be clear. It is getting attention. Mostly just because this guy, he is kind of a threat, right? Because he has money, he's arrogant, and he would be willing to attack Monero for his own gain. So it is kind of concerning in that regard. However, if you look at the actual data coming in, it's really not much of a concern, and I'm going to break down why. So basically what their mining pool is doing is they're mining Monero and then taking that Monero and just selling it for Qubic. Or I think they're selling it for Tether, and then they're buying Qubic, and then they're burning that Qubic. And so the miners of Qubic, by doing this, are actually seeing quite a big profit. The profitability of doing this is actually greater than just mining Monero. So because of that, they're able to entice people to mine Qubic instead of Monero. Now, we saw this in the past with a project called Zephyr. Kind of same thing, where it was a RandomX mined project, and because it was just profitable to mine, people were mining it. And what happened? Well, it was a scam. So now nobody mines it anymore. But for a while, it actually had a very good hash rate because of this. So similarly, because Qubic is, all speculative hype, it is profitable to mine right now. So economically, if you are a new miner, you actually are incentivized to mine Qubic instead of Monero. And again, the mining, quote unquote, of Qubic is being targeted at mining Monero and then selling that Monero. So you're kind of like mining another project to mine Qubic, which is kind of a backwards way of doing it. But the logic that the Qubic guys have is that it builds hype for their project if they can swallow a reputable project like Monero. And it's like free advertising for them. However, this runs into a lot of issues. The first major issue is they're not actually mining a lot of Monero or as much Monero as they say they are. And this is actually best illustrated by a research article that Rucknium posted on his GitHub. where Qubic actually publishes their view key for their Monero wallet. They only have one, combined mining pool, and that mining pool has a address and a view key, which you can actually check yourself. And if you actually look at this view key, it becomes quite clear that they're not mining as much Monero as you would think they are. So basically, if you look at the data, Qubic in their mining hash power greatly oscillates in the course of like minutes. In fact, if you actually watch the mining pool, you can see this, where when Qubic kind of focuses on mining Monero, their hash rate spikes up, and then they just turn it off. And this happens like many times over the course of an hour. And so the reason that this has been said is because they are mostly mining something else. I think they're training an AI, so it's GPU mining, and then they focus their CPU mining on Monero. Now, when they just CPU mine and focus on Monero, they are getting approximately 500 mega hashes per second, which is a lot, to be fair. They're claiming that this is only 10% of what they can do, but they haven't really proven that, right? They're kind of like making this claim that they can mine a lot more. We haven't seen that. And in actual fact, too, if you look at their actual average over the course of an hour, it's more like 200 mega hashes per second, which is like decent. That's like still one of the larger pools when they actually are mining, but it's not as great as what they're claiming. They keep claiming they're reaching a new all-time high every day, but it's actually over the course of the hour, because they're turning it on and turning it off. It's really not that much, or as bad as what they're claiming, right? It's nowhere near a 51% attack. So basically, they're going to mine empty blocks, so they're just not going to include other transactions. And in doing so, they're going to try to convince other miners to join their pool, which is way easier said than done. I don't even think that would work, essentially. But this is their plan. Now, this guy come from beyond, he has also said that he would censor transactions, which doesn't even work. I don't know how that makes any sense. How would you censor a transaction? When pressed on this on Twitter, he just doesn't answer. So, whatever. All of this is exaggerated nonsense, essentially. Furthermore, if the hash rate for Qubic continues to climb up, the rewards will be less, right? This is just simple economics. If you have more people mining, you're going to get smaller pieces of that pie, right? Fluffy Pony made a tweet about this, where he basically said exactly that, where like if Qubic's hash rate were to double, so say they're now mining like 10% of the network at a consistent basis, then their miners will get less Qubic in return because there's more people mining it. So really the economics of it doesn't even really support what they want, right? And here's the biggest irony behind all of this. Right now, if you go to miningpoolstats.stream/Monero, this is a mining pool kind of monitor that we can use to monitor the network and see who's controlling what. It's very clear that the real problem right now is actually Support XMR. Support XMR has like 45% of the hash rate currently. And here's the most ironic part about all this. Like, you have all this attention on Qubic and how Qubic is going to take over the network, and there's a lot of like bad vibes here. But actually, Qubic is helping the network like a lot, because when Qubic is like mining at full capacity, they're taking away from Support XMR's dominance, and Support XMR's dominance actually goes down to like 38%. So I mean, it's just kind of funny that like there's all this attention on Qubic and how bad they are, and meanwhile Support XMR like very clearly has like the most hash rate of anybody, and they're borderline over 50%. Like right now, if they just collaborated with Nanopool, who's at 20%, or HashVault Pro, they could shut down the network if they wanted to, and just print empty blocks. if those three collaborated, like they could shut down the network, for example. And that doesn't even include Qubic. So hopefully Qubic actually has a higher hash rate because they can help us out. So that's to be determined. Most of this is just spam nonsense as far as it looks, based on the exaggerated, claims that they're making. It's nowhere near what they're claiming, essentially. All right, so we got some breaking news for you guys. Archetyp Market has been seized by law enforcement. The news broke this morning while I was at work, actually. The episode was already recorded, and I had to now go back and re-record this part because in the initial recording of this episode, I was actually speculating as to what actually happened to Archetyp. There was a lot of weird stuff happening where the admin for the site, who now we know is arrested, had made a message on Dread or made a post that's signed, but it was just very odd, and there was some grammatical things pointing to, like a very likely impersonation going on. And there was also just some weirdness with how they were responding to people. And yeah, it turns out it was the feds. The individual, who is not named at this point, was arrested on June 11th, and it looks like other people have been arrested as well. So this is a big story because Archetyp Market, of course, is the largest drug market, or was the largest drug darknet market in the world. And they were a Monero-only market. They had been up for about 6 years, I believe. And it finally caught up to them. And now we're seeing a wave of arrests going on throughout Europe. So I have an article here from Europol, which we are going to take a look at. And it says here, Europe-wide takedown hits longest standing dark web drug market. Administrator arrested in Spain, top vendors targeted in Sweden. Law enforcement authorities across Europe have dismantled Archetyp Market, the most enduring dark web marketplace, following a large-scale operation involving 6 countries supported by Europol and Eurojust. Between 11 and 13 June, a series of coordinated actions took place across Germany, the Netherlands, Romania, Spain, and Sweden, targeting the platform's administrator, moderators, key vendors, and technical infrastructure. Around 300 officers were deployed to carry out enforcement actions and secure critical evidence. Archetyp Market operated as a drug marketplace for over 5 years, amassing more than 600,000 users worldwide with a total transaction volume of at least 250 million euros. With over 17,000 listings, it's one of the few darknet markets that allowed the sale of fentanyl and other highly potent synthetic opioids. As an aside, that's ridiculous. I think pretty much all these markets have fentanyl. They're just rebranded as other things. But anyways, back to the article. As a result of the action, the platform's infrastructure in the Netherlands was taken offline, and its administrator, a 30-year-old German national, was arrested in Barcelona, Spain. In parallel, measures were taken in Germany and Sweden against 1 moderator and 6 of the marketplace's highest vendors, and assets worth 7.8 million euro were seized. This operation, led by German authorities, marks the end of a criminal service that enabled the anonymous trade in high volumes of illicit drugs, including cocaine, MDMA, amphetamines, and synthetic opioids. The platform's endurance, scale, and reputation within the criminal community places it alongside now-defunct markets such as Dream and Silk Road, both notorious for their role in facilitating online drug trafficking. The article then says that the takedown follows years of intensive investigative work to map the platform's technical architecture and identify the individuals behind it. By tracing financial flows, analyzing digital forensic evidence, and working closely with partners on the ground, authorities were able to deliver a decisive blow to one of the most prolific drug markets on the dark web. Europol contributed to the efficiency and effectiveness of the international investigations. The agency organized multiple coordination meetings that made it possible for authorities to exchange critical information for the investigation. During the action days and the preliminary investigations, Eurojust coordinated the execution of mutual legal assistance and European investigation orders. So based on that reading, it does say that, they were tracing his financial flows. And a lot of people are assuming that this means that, Monero was traced in this situation, and it actually probably was. And I talk about this in Attack of the Poison Outputs. But if you are just, following somebody's usage on a KYC exchange, you can actually loosely trace what they're doing, even if they're using a coin swap service. So for example, if this guy was sending exact amounts of Monero for Bitcoin and then swapping that Bitcoin, swapping Monero for Bitcoin using a coin swap and then sending that Bitcoin to a KYC exchange, if this keeps happening over and over again and the amounts are matching what they're sending this guy, they can actually use that as a reasonable case that they're the same person. And we know that they can do this because they did this with Incognito Market. And I'll link that in the description box. I've made a video on Incognito Market and that arrest. Well, that's actually exactly what happened. They subpoenaed CoinSwap websites, and they looked for Monero to Bitcoin swaps. And so in a way, they actually traced Monero that was sent to that KYC exchange without even looking at the blockchain. So that is very plausible that they were able to do that. Now, did Monero lead to his arrest? Probably not. You have to understand that this guy was the head of the largest drug darknet market in the world. Okay, we had just said, he had made $250 million or 250 million euros in drug revenue. That's crazy. So there was a lot of people trying to figure out who this guy was. And so because of that, every single aspect of his OPSEC had to be ironclad. And I'm assuming he slipped up somewhere. It's just inevitable. If you're spending 5 years and everything you're doing is being watched, eventually someone's going to figure out who you are. Furthermore, there may be techniques that are not revealed to the public, that are exploits that only law enforcement knows. And perhaps some of these are even illegal. And later on, once they figure out, okay, this is the guy, they use parallel construction and build their case, that way. They can essentially illegally figure out who the person is and then, do good police work to piece together a connection between, the illicit activity and the suspect, right? Very plausible. In fact, that Incognito Market case, again, it's kind of unclear how they figured out he owned the server. It's highly likely that in the Incognito Market case, his server that he had purchased was a honeypot. It's not said in the release of information that we have, the court documents, but this is actually what I believe. So that could have happened here where, maybe the guy was using a server that was a honeypot, Or it could be an exploit with Tor, for all we know. Highly plausible. Or, his ex-girlfriend was pissed off at him. There's just a million different things. Another thing, though, is all the moderators, maybe one of those guys got compromised. And because that person was more trustworthy for the admin, perhaps they were able to get more information, out of him. So we can make a lot of, guesses as to exactly what happened. But as of this point, it's all kind of, up in the air. And I'm sure we're going to be hearing more about this case because this is probably the biggest seizure, at least for, markets from Dread for a while. Because the last couple markets have exit scammed, just disappeared or retired. But this is a straight up seizure. Of course, though, I'm already reading this, people saying, well, I guess Monero's not private. that sort of thing. And it's like, listen, this guy was using Monero. He was also using Tor and PGP. Just because you're using privacy tools doesn't mean that you can protect yourself from the full weight of like all these Western intelligence agencies. That type of criticism only comes from people who probably have poor OPSEC, because this is just an entirely different game, right? Monero has very strong built-in privacy. That's why it's being adopted on darknet markets. Simple as. PGP is used on darknet markets. But in this case, his PGP, the admin's PGP, was compromised. The police had it. So even though PGP is great, if someone just steals your keys, they steal your identity. But, as I mentioned, people kind of figured out that it wasn't the same guy just based on how he was talking, which is kind of funny. Like, I don't know why law enforcement was so shit at impersonating this guy. Like, they could have had a honeypot for years, right? So they totally fucked that one up. I don't know, man. Once you attach an identity to somebody, all the information's on the internet, right? And you can just kind of work backwards. And this is probably what happened with his Monero transactions. Once they have the name of the person, and the guy's using KYC, for example, and so therefore he's using a centralized exchange, they can just look at that centralized exchange, and suddenly all the transactions that went into that wallet, that's now evidence, because it's a public blockchain. So, we'll have more on this in the future, I'm sure. Graphene, the beloved operating system for Android, supported by many in Monero and many in the privacy community. They have announced that they are having some difficulties with porting. And to kind of summarize it before I read it, basically, they are probably going to have to start making their own devices soon, as the future Pixel devices, it is unclear if they will be able to, use these Pixel devices in the future due to difficulties in porting. So this is what the tweet thread says. In May, we began preparing to port to Android 16 despite our most active senior developer responsible for leading OS development being unavailable. Android 16 launched today, and porting is going to be significantly more difficult than we were expecting. We did far more preparation for Android 16 than we've ever done for any previous yearly release. Since we weren't able to obtain OEM partner access, we did extensive reverse engineering of the upcoming changes. Developers also practiced by redoing previous quarterly/yearly ports. Fortunately, Android has made changes which will make it much harder for us to port to Android 16 in future releases. It will also make adding support for new Pixels much more difficult. We're likely going to need to focus on making Graphene OS devices sooner than we expected. We don't understand why these changes were made, and it's a major turn in the wrong direction. Google is in the process of losing multiple antitrust cases in the United States. Android and Chrome being split into separate companies has been requested by the DOJ. They may be preparing for it. We're hard at work on getting the port to Android 16 done, but there's a large amount of work we weren't expecting. Having our own devices meeting our hardware requirements would reduce the time pressure to migrate to new releases and could be used to obtain early access ourselves. Based on talks with OEMs, paying for what we need will cost millions of dollars. OEM, by the way, stands for Original Equipment Manufacturer. It goes on, though, to say, we've made a lot of progress on porting to Android 16 already. If things haven't been made harder for us, we would likely be able to publish an experimental release tomorrow and quickly get a release into the alpha and then beta channels to start ironing out the bugs in the port. And lastly, they say, we'll be able to continue, but we need our own devices in order to make sure we have new devices we can keep using in the future. Yeah, so basically, if you are a Graphene user, you probably won't be buying Pixels that much more, based on the information that we are getting now. Funnily enough, I actually literally a week ago purchased a Pixel, a new Pixel. So it's actually quite possible I have one of the last Pixel models compatible with Graphene. But this is still a developing story. They may have miles in the future for Pixel compliant with future Graphene releases, but as of this point, it is unclear if Pixels in the future will be compatible with Graphene. So yeah, keep an eye out for that, and if you can, shoot them a donation, because they will probably need to invest in making their own phones. So there's been some chaos lately in Linux regarding Xorg. This news was broke by Lunduk recently. Basically, Linux has a display server called Xorg, which has been used, I think, since like the 80s. It's been used forever. And there's a new implementation. It's not really new. It's been around for like 15 years, called Wayland. And Wayland is essentially now being pushed by a lot of the distributions. In fact, Ubuntu is going to be Wayland exclusive, I think, in the future. And there's a lot of controversy behind this, because there's this kind of belief that Red Hat Enterprise, which is essentially the commercial Linux distribution that has a lot of influence and investment in Linux, essentially there's a lot of belief that they are pushing Wayland, and Wayland is seen as being very buggy and just not as good as the tried and true Xorg that's been around forever. I actually myself have experienced this personally. When I started recording for my channel, the screen recorder just wasn't working because I was running Wayland. And so I switched over to Xorg, and then everything just worked. And I'm like, all right, fuck it, whatever. I'm not somebody who's like a super power user of Linux, but like, when something just basic like screen recording isn't working, it's like, come on, guys. You've had this for like how long? Like I can't even use OBS with this. Like, fucking whatever. So anyways, that's happening. There's shit flinging going on. I'm not going to get into it because it's irrelevant. But some good news, though, is Xorg is being forked into Xlibre, and the main contributor to Xorg on GitHub is maintaining the fork. And that's what's cool about Linux. When you have these kind of splits, people can, fork the project, right? But anyways, that's going on. And let us now get to some Monero news. Shopinbit posted their stats for May, and I was wrong on this one. I thought Monero would have a much better May. It actually had a worse May. Monero is down for Shopinbit. Bitcoin dominated with 78% of the usage, and Monero was at 21.7%. So great showing from Bitcoin. Lightning was at 0.2%. so Monero and Lightning getting mogged by Bitcoin. Nice job, Bitcoin. Moving on. Open Monero. Apparently, the protocol was hacked or something, and a lot of people don't believe it. Open Monero is a remake of local Monero. I don't know who's running it necessarily, but it looks like they got hacked. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, local Monero had such a good reputation in Monero just because those guys had been involved in Monero for so long. So having a new site come out, you have to like trust the person, trust the person running it. Yeah, I don't know. The people who launched this aren't really trustworthy, and this is what happened. So, anyways, don't use Open Monero. They already were very kind of shady, and now they may have just stolen a bunch of Monero. So I think they, on their site, hold on. It says, okay, all funds, which was 72 Monero, have been stolen in a hack on June 6, 2025. Registration, login, and trading is disabled until the firewall is updated. All users will be refunded. Vendors are first on the list. So yeah, they're saying people are going to be refunded. Hopefully that happens. I don't know. But this is obviously not good. So I wouldn't use Open Monero for the considerable. I wouldn't use Open Monero if I were you. And the last Monero tidbit here is a layer 2 scaling project called Grease that someone put out on Reddit. I guess this is a payment channel protocol. And yeah, I mean, I don't really have much thoughts on this other than like, we don't really need a layer 2 for Monero, at least in my opinion. You know, I talk about this in Darknet Market Maximalism, where the concept of global adoption is a grift. Like, we don't need millions of people using Monero right now. I mean, in an ideal circumstance, that could happen. But let's just like grow organically. Like, it's just putting the cart before the horse, as far as I'm concerned. You know, making Monero scale on the base layer, that's really what's important. And if we get to a point where like we need a layer 2 because Monero is just completely broken, okay, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I mean, Monero scales fantastically on the base layer. You know, this is how we built it with dynamic blocks and tail emission. So yeah, I'm not really sure I agree with this concept, but like if you do have like a layer 2, you know, having payment channels, I can see why you would have that. But yeah, I don't know how this works. I didn't really read their GitHub. So I whenever people talk about like, oh, can we have a layer 2 for Monero? I feel like it's just people, I don't know. It's like they're thinking about a hypothetical future instead of like being concerned for now. Like there's like way more important stuff to be focusing on now. For example, full chain membership proofs. Quantum. I mean, quantum, that's really, if you're like thinking of hypothetical stuff, it should be about, you know, quantum computing in Monero, because that's actually like a big deal. And that's like something that we really need to be focusing on to solve like right now. You know, mining and stuff, that's another important thing. UX, that's super important. Layer 2, that's like so far down the list in my opinion. So the last thing we're going to talk about is Michael Saylor being an idiot. It's really the weekly Michael Saylor is an idiot portion of this program. He was interviewed on this show. What was it? Was it CNBC? It looks like some financial program. He talks for about 4 minutes, so we're going to play this and react to it. And I guess there's a lot of red flags in this. I haven't listened to it yet, but let's check it out.
A recent call from Jim Chanos. Of course, he's a legendary short seller. He came out recently and said, basically, buy Bitcoin, short strategy shares. And just to set the scene here, I'm curious what you make of that.
You know, I don't think he understands what our business model is. We're actually the largest issuer of Bitcoin-backed credit instruments in the world. So last week, we just raised $1 billion by selling a preferred stock, non-cumulative, called Stride. That means we basically borrowed money that we never have to pay back, that we pay a dividend on, but we could suspend the dividend if we needed to. So Jim has been thinking that we somehow needed to sell the equity. We now are in a situation where we have Strike, Stride, and Strife, 3 publicly floating preferred stocks that are not dilutive to the equity. They all meet a different market requirement.
Right.
That $110 million of Bitcoin we bought last week, that was acquired without issuing any common stock. So what's going on here is that we're using our $60 billion of Bitcoin collateral to issue credit instruments. They never come due. There's no liquidation risk. There's not even an interest rate risk, right? It's a non-cumulative preferred, and we could suspend the dividends.
Right.
So at the end of the day, if he's lucky enough to short the stock below 1 times NAV, we're going to issue the preferreds, buy back the stock, and make money for our shareholders. if the stock trades at a weak premium, we're just going to sell the preferreds. And if the stock rallies up, he's going to get liquidated and wiped out.
Well, let's talk about that premium, because that is the heart of his short call on strategy, as you point out here. So he said recently on a podcast that shareholders are paying around $220,000 for Bitcoin that trades at $110,000, but the company is doing everything it can to close that spread, which is great. There's a catalyst. So he's referring to the fact that you are selling your own shares and buying Bitcoin. But when it comes to the premium that strategy shares enjoy over the price of Bitcoin itself, do you think that that's sustainable? The fact that, like he points out, that basically the value of your company is trading at twice that of Bitcoin itself?
What he still doesn't understand is we're not a holding company or a closed-end trust. We're an operating company. So when we issue, trust can't leverage the Bitcoin. They can't issue preferred shares. They can't issue permanent shares of equity at a premium. We can. Our company's generated a BTC dollar gain equal to about $8.4 billion in the first 2 quarters of this year. That's the equivalent of earnings for a Bitcoin treasury company. Our target for the year is $15 billion. And so he's valuing the business that's generating $8.4 billion of shareholder value at zero. And he's hoping that somehow the equity will trade to NAV. But what he's not paying attention to is, if we can issue preferred shares that yield 10% and invest it in Bitcoin, which has been going up 57% for the past 4.5 years, we're capturing the 47% arbitrage effectively risk-free for our common stock shareholders. And if you want to value the company, you have to value the company's ability to generate Bitcoin yield or Bitcoin gains over and above the actual holdings of the Bitcoin the company has.
So I got a tweet here from Row Rider, and he comments about how many red flags there are in this little clip here. So, I mean, like, the main thing is, like, how many times did Saylor bring up the fact that this dividend is risk-free and that he doesn't have to pay the dividend? I mean, he says that like 3 times in that clip, maybe even more. Calling this risk-free is crazy. Like, if you're holding this like preferred stock, you're probably thinking like, wait, what the hell did I just buy? Because Saylor's like, oh yeah, we don't have to pay that. Like, what? He also admits in this clip that if the MicroStrategy net asset value drops, he plans to prop it up with more dilution. So essentially, he's just gonna sell more of these, preferred stocks. It's literally he's just talking about, yeah, I'm gonna make this Ponzi even higher. Again, the people who are buying these stocks, they're getting yield. Where's that yield coming from? It's from people buying it. You are the yield. And at some point, that is going to collapse. All right, guys, I'm going to end it there. Thanks for listening to another episode of Anti Moonboy News. I got t-shirts available at antimoonboy.com/merch. And as always, every Monday, you can listen to the show, get the latest in peer-to-peer cash. If you would like to send a super chat, you can go to xmrchat.com/Xenu. But yeah, see you guys next week.